Start your wellness journey at Whole Foods Market, where it's Jumpstart January through the 16th. Stock up on supplements with some of the year's biggest savings. Plus, save on air-chilled organic boneless skinless chicken breasts, organic Honeycrisp apples, organic large Hass avocados, and more. And since Whole Foods Market is the only certified organic national grocer, it's easy to make them your wellness destination. Jumpstart your January now at Whole Foods Market.
Major phone carriers make you sign contracts with rigid data plans to trap you into a kind of forced phonogamy. Sounds pretty insecure if you ask me. At Consumer Cellular, we believe in a more consensual and healthy form of phonogamy, free of contracts and more flexible to your data needs. This way, you stick around not because we force you to with contracts and fees, but because you love our phone plans. Like ardently love our phone plans. Phonogamously. Consumer Cellular. When freedom calls, we're here to answer. Call us at 1-888-FREEDOM.
Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game. I'm Kevin Day, slightly less grumpy after last night's display against Chelsea, and he is Kieran Maguire, and we have to crack on to make sure we finish in time to see Brighton concede 10 goals against Liverpool, fingers crossed, in about 10 minutes. You looking forward to that, Kieran?
Yeah, I always look forward to seeing my team play. You wouldn't be a football fan if it wasn't that way. And you know, the nature of a football fan is that we live in hope.
Yeah, I can honestly say there have been times when I haven't always looked forward to seeing Palace play, to be quite honest. There have times when I've had to be dragged out of the pub. But I believe, Kieran, you have some good news for us Palace fans, do you not?
I do have some good news for Palace fans, yes. Last year, of course, you sold Aaron Wan-Bissaka to Manchester United for £45 million, and they paid half of it up front, and they said they were going to give you the other half as an IOU, which they're going to pay around about now. So what Palace did is they took that IOU to a bank who cashed it in, a bit like a payday loan cheque. So they didn't get the full £22.5 million. But the good news is that United have paid the final instalment. So the bank have released Palace from the mortgage attached to the IOU. So it's always good to have less people after you for money.
Yeah, happy days. If we can find a way of that happening for me, that would be great. I might have a word with Steve Parishon if he's rolling in it at the moment. That's good to hear, Kieran. Thank you. It's Thursday, so it's news day, which means we shall be talking today about Sheffield United, Tranmere, Derby, Carlisle, Wigan, and Wigan, because we are not going to let this one go. And in fact, in a few moments, we'll hear from the Mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham, who got off the phone to Kieran, I'd say about 10 minutes ago. But before we hear that interview, Kieran, what is the latest on the Wigan story?
Well, the latest is the administrators have made 70 people redundant. You know, and this is the story which, you know, that people focus on the football and they focus on the footballers, but actually it's the people behind the scenes. You know, we've got people there who've worked at the club for years. They love the club. It is an integral part of their life, and they've all lost their job. The staff haven't been paid for June, so that's going to drag on. They'll have a claim, but that will take time to be paid. And Gerald Krasner, who is the administrator, he's having an investigation. They're going to appeal the 12-point deduction for this season, but we don't know whether or not that will be successful. But he's also concerned that there could be a 15-point deduction when Wigan come out of administration, because if they fail to pay the creditors at least 25 pence in the pound, then another penalty kicks in. So Wigan could end up getting relegated through no fault of their own due to the nefarious activities which have taken place between the two new owners. And they could also start next season with a 15-point deduction unless they're able to sell the club and allow them to pay the creditors at least at least 25 pence in the pound. Gerald Krasner also said that this £24 million loan that was repaid to the owners, well, he doesn't know who paid it, but it certainly wasn't Wigan themselves. So it's becoming more Agatha Christie by the day, and you've got to give a huge amount of credit to the Wigan fans. They've gone out and they've been forensic detectives themselves. They found out that, they found out that there's a guy called Al Young who appears to be the new owner, who was made a bankrupt in 2004, and here he is spending £40 million on a football club in the middle of a global pandemic in 2020. None of it makes any sense.
Just briefly, that 15-point deduction, that's an extra 3 points on the 12. That's not another 15 on top of the 12,
No, it'll be a fresh 15 points from the
it's
way
a fresh...
Yeah.
Oh, so that could be a 27-point deduction, essentially.
In effect, yes, which is
Wow.
which is obscene because it's football. It's not it's not spreadsheets.
Well, and also when this story first broke about 4 weeks ago, Kieran, less than that even, and you were the person who broke the story on the pod. And we were laughing, essentially. It seemed so preposterous what was happening before we realised what was happening. Just what you were telling me about people selling clubs to themselves and loaning money to themselves, it almost was carry on Wigan. But now, of course, 75 people have been made redundant, and most of those people will have been at the club for some time. And, of course, making 75 people redundant in Wigan has a knock-on effect on the rest of the Wigan economy, because that's 75 people who won't be going out, who won't be getting fancy shopping. So the ripple effect of a club in trouble is much greater than I think even the football authorities understand, isn't it?
Very much so. And you've only got to hear sort of the fans talking. And the Wigan fans have been absolutely brilliant. They have raised over 100 grand already through crowdfunding. Trying to make sure that they can fulfil the fixtures, because that's another potential issue. I mean, Wigan are playing. We're recording this on the Wednesday night, so Wigan are playing today. What are the players going to do? They don't know whether they're going to be paid. You can't expect them to be motivated, but you just hope that they are going to do their best, because they are professionals, and they love football as much as we do.
Well, also, this is a time, and forgive me because I didn't check that Wigan were playing today, whether they're home or away, but this is a time where fans really get, the Wigan fans would have turned out in numbers for this game, basically, to get behind the players, and that would have motivated the players. But now they're in an empty stadium, they can't see the passion of the Wigan fans. And yes, there'll be people listening to this at home saying, well, there aren't many Wigan fans, but that's neither here nor there. The people who support Wigan travel home and away in decent numbers, whatever you think about the size of the club, and they're as passionate about their club as anybody else is about theirs, which is why we are determined on this pod. It's become a kind of test case for me, Kieran. We are determined that this doesn't happen, and I'm looking forward to hearing what Andy Burnham has to say. You've told me a couple of things, but he's the mayor of Greater Manchester, and he spoke to you within the last hour.
Andy, first of all, welcome to The Price of Football. It's a shame under the circumstances we're having a chat. When did you first become aware of what had happened in respect of Wigan Athletic?
It was last Wednesday, Kieran. It would have been about 12 o'clock, and I was chairing the Greater Manchester COVID Emergency Committee. So I was dealing with other stuff, and a text popped up on my phone, and my heart sank, because I live in the Wigan Borough. I'm surrounded by Wigan Latics fans wherever I go, and I know what the club means to them. And so I knew straight away that this was going to be a devastating situation for people.
Very much so. I mean, we've got rules in place from the football authorities. The EFL have got their rules. The FA seem to sit on the sidelines. Do you think this is beyond football in its ability to sort of either A, govern itself, or B, find solutions to when we have problems in relation to owners, which result in situations such as this?
I think that's been demonstrated, Kieran, not just in recent cases, but in pretty much the 28 or so years since the Premier League began. Football has never shown itself to be capable of regulating the financial vested interests that circle the game. The money men. I mean, it just never has been able to do it, and there've been so many casualties along the way. And I'm just hoping and praying that Wigan Athletic are not going to be the latest one.
That's right. I mean, they're now in administration. So in theory, administration will help to protect the club, but we're not exactly sure protecting it from what. Is there a role now for central government or local government in the sense of forming some form of protection? Because you're the mayor of Manchester. We've had Bolton, Bury, Macclesfield, Oldham. There's all issues in relation to those clubs and their owners. Now we've got Wigan. Do you feel it's beyond your ability as a local as a local representative? Do we have to go to central government, or do we have to be looking to the football authorities to up their act?
Well, it's a really good question. So Bury, Kieran, I did get very involved in, and I got the investment team at Greater Manchester to try and help. And what was clear to me in that situation was it was such a mess that we just couldn't unravel it. So the game had allowed that club to just become so kind of enmeshed in the problem that it just couldn't be unpicked. And I have a bit of a history here. So I was part of the original football task force when we were looking at independent regulation of football. I was Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport when I set the game an ultimatum, if you might remember, about regulation. And each time it's shown itself incapable of rising to this particular challenge and solving regulating finance in the interests of the sport. It's not been able to do it. And I think time has run out, to be honest. I think the time has arrived for independent financial regulation of football and leave matters on the pitch to the FA and the other governing bodies.
Yeah, fair enough, absolutely. I mean, if we compare what we're seeing here in England to Germany, they've got a 51% rule, which means that no one person can take control of a club. And that's reflective of the fact that in German society, as it is in English culture, the football club is so central. Your heart does go out. The fact that the Bury groundsman is still mowing the grass on a regular basis, even though there's going to be no football there, but because it's so much of a part of his life, should football clubs become protected assets? In the sense of either the stadium or the clubs themselves to prevent something of this nature occurring? Because, as you rightly said, what we've seen to date from the football authorities is, it's a shame, we're sorry, and we get platitudes, but what we're not seeing is action.
Well, I agree. And, we used to have regulatory protections. It used to be called Rule 34 that the FA used to have in its rule book, and it was a rule that prevented the asset stripping of football clubs and protected them as community institutions that promoted the interests of the game. And you look back to the early mid-90s where that was all jettisoned, and the PLC, the era of the PLC arrived, and then people started saying, well, they're just businesses, but they weren't, because they were highly regulated sporting entities that was prevented from becoming pure businesses by the nature of the FA regulations at the time. And we just abandoned all of that, unlike Germany and Spain. And, we've ended up in a situation where the finances of football are so perilous that clubs are often hanging by a thread. And everything that's been built up over decades is literally at the mercy of kind of individuals who can kind of terminate that history almost at a whim. So it's a desperate state of affairs. It really is. And, we've had 25, 30 years now of the over-commercialisation of football. And, we've got to decide what we want from our game here. At the end of the day, it's got to be about promoting the best interests of the sport rather than making money for a whole series of hangers-on who, quite frankly, deliver very little back to the game we all love.
That's right. I mean, you're saying that we've got all these hangers on, and then you contrast that to the Wigan fans themselves, who in the space of a week that they've put together a crowdfunding of over £100,000. They are acting as the forensic detectives that you would expect the football authorities to have been themselves before giving the green light to these deals going through. As an outsider, I looked at the deal and I said, well, who in their right minds would pay 40 odd million pounds for a football club in the middle of a global pandemic? It didn't look right at the time. But clearly things have unravelled since then. Have you got any words for sort of solace, as a fan of football itself, for people in Wigan who might be listening? Because I've been in touch on some of the forums and things of that nature, and have tried to get to the bottom of what's coming out of this company IEC, and none of it seems logic, and people now suddenly realise just what football does mean to them. I've got friends who are Bury fans who they say the worst time of the week is 3:00 on a Saturday afternoon, because what was central to their lives for so many years has been stolen away from them, from people who've got no love for the game.
Well, I mean, you put it so well, and you put it so passionately, and we all feel that, don't we? I mean, whenever one of these situations arises, I mean, I happen to live in Wigan, as I said, but I did try hard with Bury, just because I remember when my club, Everton, were in difficulties in the 90s, flirting with relegation, ownership problems. It's devastating, isn't it? And you just, these clubs are bound up with your family, your history, your personality, aren't they? And you just feel like something that's part of you is being ripped out of you when these situations arise. So, have I got any words of solace? Well, I am working with the MP for Wigan, Lisa Nandy, who's a very, very effective MP. We have written to Rick Parry. He's written back to us saying that there'll be an investigation. He's offered to meet us. I think it's a sympathetic letter, to be fair to Rick. We do have our concerns about how on earth this got past the Football League, and obviously we'll talk to him about that. But, he seemed to be in the same place as us about wanting to save this football club. I mean, when you're looking at international finance and the complexities of it, it's probably not surprising, is it, that the English football authorities can't unravel, companies listed on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange that have casinos in Manila. I mean, this isn't their forte, is it? Let's be fair. They're not international finance experts. So that's why I would say to the football authorities, hand that over to somebody else, a specialist independent regulator, and then you lot can focus on the football matters. Whether we can unravel all of this in respect of Wigan, I honestly don't know. But we are talking to people who care about the club locally, Lisa and I, and we'll do our utmost to save it. And I'll certainly put the full help of Greater Manchester at the disposal of the club to see if we can do that.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time, Andy, and fingers crossed for everybody who's a Latics fan, that as we go forwards, that administration, it's unpleasant. We've already seen the redundancies take place and some of the scare stories, but a lot of clubs have been into administration and have managed to come out, and I think that's what we've all got to hope for in respect of Wigan itself. Yeah,
just to say, Kieran, I mean, I'm hearing stories in our community of people who've worked for the club for years being made redundant. I know what their community scheme has done. It always kind of sort of galled me a little bit that one of my kids wore a Wigan Latics community tracksuit top for a number of years because they got given it at one of their school events. But it's evidence that this club are absolutely in the community. They're in the schools. They work hard and they're well loved. Actually, people have a lot of respect for Wigan Athletic Football Club. I know Joe Royle, Peter Reid are involved. There's a lot of people with a lot of affection for the club, and you think of the players they've produced over the years. This is a great football club, and it deserves to be saved. So yeah, absolutely. Hear what you say. We're all going to be doing our best to support them. But if I could just say, Kieran, just think about what else is coming here. We've got a football pyramid that's going to be devastated by the lack of kind kind of crowds at live football over the rest of this year. The bigger picture here is, yes, independent regulation of football, but I think it's also a moment where the Premier League has got to give up some of its billions and let some of that flow back down the football system, because, we've been papering over the cracks for years, haven't we, in football? This sport has got to start looking after its own, and that means looking after clubs at every level of the English game. And the time has come to bring back some redistribution of finance right throughout the English football pyramid.
So, Kieran, he's pretty adamant where the blame lies. It's at the football authorities. He said they've done nothing for 20 years. He said, and it's time for an independent regulator of football finance, which is a drastic suggestion, but just shows how angry the mayor of Greater Manchester is.
He is. Remember, he used to be a minister himself, involved at the DCMS. So he is familiar with football. He is a football fan, he senses a disappointment. But also, if you think about it, being the mayor of Manchester, we've had Bury, we've had Bolton, Macclesfield, Oldham, now Wigan. Manchester is a hotspot for football in a positive way, but it's becoming a hotspot for football in a negative way, and this is all connected to club owners. And it's the same story again and again and again, and all that we are getting is platitudes. The EFL came out with a statement yesterday, and I do feel to a certain extent they've been outmanoeuvred by the people involved. But they said, well, they've never met the owner. If they've never met the owner, why on earth did they accept that that he was a fit and proper person to run a football club?
Again, this has been a theme of our pod since the very first pod we did. You'd think, at the very least, the new owner would have to turn up at EFL headquarters, wherever that is, with his passport and a couple of utility bills, just to actually prove it's him. It's just so shabby the way the EFL allow people to take clubs over, and I'm getting annoyed, so I'm going to stop now. But we've been in touch with the shadow minister for sport and culture, who has agreed to come and talk to us. But I think it's only fair that we try and get the actual minister for sport and culture on first, Oliver Dowden. So we are trying to get in touch with him, and hopefully he'll come on and tell us what he thinks the government should be doing, if anything, about this. But this is quite clear that this is not one of those cases where football owners have been. This is not Mark Goldberg, who was a Palace fan who came into some money essentially and bought the club. This is not a businessman trying to make money. This is, as you say, a nefarious affair, for want of a better word, and the people that are suffering are those people that have been made redundant and the Wigan fans. So this is somewhere where the government and the FA have to step in and sort this out, basically. Anyway, elsewhere, Kieran, Sheffield United, old friends of the pod, have taken out a mortgage on Bramall Lane after borrowing money from the Emirates Bank.
That's right. If you recall, that there was a dispute between the two owners of Sheffield United, Prince Abdullah of Saudi, and Kevin McCabe, who was local. And this was a ding-dong which went through the courts for around about 4 years, and eventually it was decided in favour of Prince Abdullah. But part of the deal was that at the time, Kevin McCabe owned the properties. So the court said to Abdullah, you've now got to go and buy Bramall Lane and the training ground at a price which was kept secret. Now, Sheffield United announced with trumpets last week, well, we bought the ground, which is fantastic. We've seen all of these troubles that have arisen in respect of football clubs as soon as you get something strange happening with the properties. They either get sold on or they're mortgaged to somebody new and so on, and you get split control and things of this nature. Now, Prince Abdullah, lots of people think, well, because he's a Saudi prince, he must be a zillionaire. Well, he's not. The Saudi royal family is very large. It's got many cousins and cousins of cousins and so on. So it looks as if they've gone to the Emirates Bank, and in order to buy the property from Kevin McCabe, the club has taken out a mortgage. And that's not a bad thing. It's not necessarily going to be a problematic thing. If they're in the Premier League, and of course they've been one of the shining lights of the Premier League this season, they'll have the money to make those repayments, to make those instalments. But it's certainly a step forward into getting all the ducks in a single line as far as Sheffield United are concerned.
Well, that's something for Sheffield United fans. I'm quite tickled by the fact that you mentioned Prince Abdullah of Saudi and Kevin McCabe, and feel the need to point out that Kevin McCabe is the one from Sheffield. I think most of us had leapt to that conclusion quite early on in that conversation, to be perfectly honest. Now, Kieran, I mean, this is terrible news. It's normally you cheating on me, Kieran, but you've been cheated on by a football club. This is an awful story, and Derby County should hold their heads in shame, because you were looking forward to a couple of days devouring Derby County's accounts under the duvet, but you've not been able to. So first of all, I'm just going to check that's not because the Baroness hid them, is it?
No, I have been jilted at the jilted at the altar even.
Have you?
In
really?
the sense, well, in a football finance sense.
Oh, right, okay, good. Because, for new listeners, nothing would surprise me about your life, Kieran, to be perfectly honest. I was already rehearsing the reasons in my head for why you may have been jilted at the altar in a kind of EastEnders style, and none of them were good, which says a lot about our relationship, basically. But crack on. Sorry, I interrupted.
Derby County, under company law, you're supposed to produce your accounts 9 months after your year. So Derby's year end is the 30th of June. That gave them till the 31st of March. Rishi Sunak came along and said, well, I'm going to give you an extra 3 months because of COVID. Everybody understood that. That's fine. All the other clubs seem capable of doing that. So Derby's accounts have been out and they've not sent them in. So I can't get my spreadsheet out.
Oh.
But it is frustrating. Derby, I appreciate that they've got an ongoing case against the EFL. They've got an ongoing case by all accounts with Richard Keogh because they sacked him. They've not generated a lot of positive publicity in terms of their financial behaviour over the course of the last 12 months. So this is an opportunity for them to simply set out the figures, say, look, we've done actually pretty well this year. So you lot, throw away your raspberries and we've got nothing to worry about. But there's still no sign of them. They are late. It is a breach of company law, but you only get a £150 fine. And going on social media, some of the Derby fans are saying, well, I've got some sort of beef against the club, but that's not the case. It doesn't matter who you support. If it's your club, you just want to know that things are okay. And this is just one way of providing a bit of solace and comfort. Financially, we're doing all right. There's nothing too much to worry about. We don't want to end up, like one of those clubs such as Macclesfield that can't pay the wages on a regular basis. And publishing the information improves transparency, it improves communication, and it allows people to see that there's nothing to worry about.
Well, why do you think they haven't taken the opportunity? Because it doesn't necessarily have to be a sinister reason, does it? I mean, it could be that somebody went off sick for a week and didn't finish them. As simple as that, couldn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I'm not saying there is anything clandestine, and they've always been they've always been a bit late. But it is a frustration that they were given an extra 3 months and they've still not got round to doing that. And, perhaps it's now 76p for a first class stamp, so perhaps they posted them second class.
Maybe. Yeah. Did they actually post them?
No, it's all submitted online. I was going
to say that's probably the most naive thing I've actually said on this pod, isn't it? You have nothing against Derby County, Kieran. It's just that you've been let down by missing the opportunities. Like basically, the Baroness came in and said, "I've got something for you," and it wasn't Derby's spreadsheet. So you're upset. I understand that, Kieran. Now, Carlisle United is not a club that's particularly been on our radar. So I'm delighted that one of the few times we talk about them is a good news story. And the good news story is that a growing number of Carlisle United fans have said that they would be happy to pay for a 23-game season ticket, whether or not the football is back or not, which is an encouraging thing to hear about football fans, because we're always on their side, but the media aren't.
Start your wellness journey at Whole Foods Market, where it's Jumpstart January through the 16th. Stock up on supplements with some of the year's biggest savings. Plus, save on air-chilled organic boneless skinless chicken breast, organic Honey Crisp apples, organic large Hass avocados, and more. And since Whole Foods Market is the only certified organic national grocer, it's easy to make them your wellness destination. Jumpstart your January now at Whole Foods Market.
That's right. I think it's a really heartwarming story, and by all accounts, the fans have said, and something we've always subscribed to, we want our club to survive. We want it to be in existence, and therefore they've contacted the club and they say, look, we don't care whether you play or not. We still want to pay for a season ticket, and we'll just see how things go. Because of course, with COVID, there's no guarantee of a return to football, especially in the lower leagues, at any time in the future. And to be fair to the club, and this must be unheralded, you've got people going to a business, offering it cash, and the club, because it too has integrity, it says, sorry, folks, we just don't feel we can take your money from you because we feel that it's just that it would lack integrity in doing so, because we can't guarantee, and we don't want you to potentially be okay now financially, but not okay in a few months' time, and therefore needing the money back. So thanks, but no thanks. But by all accounts, a huge number of Carlisle fans have said in respect of refunds from this season, and I appreciate they're not the only clubs, but the vast majority of fans of all clubs who can afford it, and I've talked here about clubs outside the Premier League. I think it is very different in the Premier League. Have said, you're part of my life. You are part of my identity of Carlisle or Darlington or Doncaster or Southend or whatever it is. Keep the money. And it's further evidence, in my view, that football is special in this country. It is part of our culture, and that's why, going back to the issues at Wigan, we've got to stand up and we've got to fight. And one of the really disappointing things that I saw in the EFL statement yesterday, and this really got fans wound up from Bury, is it made reference to Wigan, and the owner had said it was due to COVID. Well, it's definitely not to do with COVID. No. And then it said, we don't want a repeat of last year's issues where Bury were forced to withdraw from the league. They weren't withdraw. I withdraw from the Baroness. That's about as far. That's what withdraw means. That Bury were kicked out. Bury were kicked out of the Football League by other clubs. So don't give me that absolute garbage about them choosing to leave or withdraw. It's utter nonsense.
I agree. I wish you could have found a better metaphor than the Baroness one, but I absolutely agree with you. And also, what the Carlisle United story shows is something that we sometimes forget doing this podcast, because we focus on those clubs where things are going wrong. We focus on the issues where fans need to know that things are going wrong, and about agents and about transfer fees and about VAT and about and late accounts. But also, we forget that there are many, many, many clubs who are owned by decent people who are trying to get their clubs through a crisis. And when the decent owners and the fans have a good symbiotic relationship, then you get fans saying, we'll cough up for a season ticket if we can, if that helps. And you get the club saying, well, that's brilliant, but we're not sure we can do that. It's, there will be clubs where fans go, sod you, you're terrible owners. Why should we make that offer? But it just shows, as you say, how not only how important football is, but how football fans respond when the club has a decent owner.
That's right, and I think that's fans of practically all clubs. We want to see. We live in hope that our owners have got the same values as us, and that club represents something good about where we live.
Yeah, absolutely. We haven't talked about Scotland for a while, so let's rectify that, because the legal challenge around relegation from the Scottish Premier League has taken an interesting turn, Guy has said.
Yes, what's happened here is that we've got Hearts and Partick Thistle, who have put in a legal claim to say that they shouldn't have been relegated as a result of COVID-19, despite the votes going against them. And then they also said if they are to be relegated, then they are entitled to £10 million worth of compensation. Now, this compensation would have to come from the other clubs. But that legal claim resulted in effectively a counterclaim from Dundee United, Wraith Rovers and Cove Rangers because if Hearts and Partick got their way, it meant that those clubs wouldn't have been promoted.
Right.
Who are the only winners out of this? Our good friends with the Silver Tongues.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, to be fair, what's happened after a 3-day hearing last week, it was decided that the courts weren't going to arbitrate on this. It was going to be the Scottish Football Association itself. So that should reduce some of the costs. But it does mean that those 3 clubs, Dundee United, Wraith Rovers and Cove Rangers, they've now started a crowdfunding campaign because they reckon it's going to cost them 150 grand or up to 150 grand in legal costs. And yet they've not played football for 4 months. They're skint. And you do feel sort of uncomfortable here. Football clubs are asking football fans to put money into a pot to pay lawyers a lot of money.
Yeah. And you can't imagine a team like Wraith Rovers would have a lot of money at the best of times, to be perfectly honest. But I mean, there are very many depressing things about this, but it's the dreary predictability of it all. I mean, because that's the first thing most people predicted would happen when it was decided that relegation issues would be decided without any football. We all said that the first thing that will happen is people will go to court, clubs will go to court, and I think we'll probably see that with Stevenage or Macclesfield, depending on what happens with the extra year 4 points deduction. And as you say, it's never the football club. I mean, there are certain clubs like Man City who can afford to go to European courts of arbitration, who can probably, I think we find that decision out on Monday, they can probably afford better lawyers than UEFA. But when it comes to Wraith Rovers and Cove, they can't afford the sort of legal fees it's going to take to win a case like this, it seems to me.
Yeah, very much so. And the tragedy is, the fixture lists actually came out in Scotland a few days ago. Yeah. They're due to restart football on the 1st of August, and potentially this might scupper that.
Yes, of course. Derby County may have let you down, Kieran, but Tranmere Rovers, which if Derby fans think you don't like them, I would guess that Tranmere Rovers fans listening to this would think you do, because you've always got kind things to say about them. But they've published their latest numbers and details of quite a big share issue. It wasn't that big. It didn't deserve the high-pitched voice, but it's quite a big share issue, Kieran, huh?
Yeah, and remember, Tranmere Rovers, these are the 2019 accounts, so this was the first year that Tranmere were back in the EFL after a few years in the National League. But this is sort of testament. Remember, we've had Mark Palios on the show, and his strategy has proven that it works. So Tranmere, they generated more revenue than any other club in League Two, and part of the reason for that is that Marks has this blueprint in that we're not just a football club, we are a community hub, and what we're going to do is we're going to provide education for those kids who won't go to school because come to Prenton Park because the manager or one of the players pops in occasionally, so it makes them feel good. It's providing health services for men of our age, Kevin, and let's face it, we don't look after ourselves particularly well. So it's providing exercise and health activities, and that's being supported by the NHS and by the local authorities. So Tranmere is making it more of a 365 day a year club. And it also managed to do that on a wage bill, and it was the only club in League Two which was below UEFA's, they call it the red line. Are you spending less than 70 pence in the pound on wages? And Tranmere managed to get promoted, pay out the promotion bonuses, and still satisfy that. So I think this is indicative of football clubs. If they start to think a bit smarter, they can get their financial house in order and come out of it, and that means that they're going to be less susceptible to takeovers because they're more robust, and the risks of having to sell the ground and all of the bad things that go along with it, those risks start to reduce.
Yeah, also I think what Tranmere Rovers have done in recent seasons, which is clever, is to say the community we're looking after isn't Liverpool. It's the Wirral. Tranmere is a separate entity. They always get roped in as the third Liverpool club, and they're not that far away. But they're saying no. These are the people around here that need looking after, and I think that's important. And I think it's important as well that we mention it to some clubs. But so, what's the significance of the share issue then?
Well, what they've done is that Tranmere have said, we're right, we are on the Wirral, we're slightly outside of Liverpool, but we're not that far from it. So they've managed to go to the Philippines, and they've just received an extra £1 million of financing from investors there, and that takes it up to $3.5 million over the course of the last 12 months. And what Tranmere are doing in response to that is they're setting up soccer schools, or football schools, of course, in the Philippines. They're giving coaching to some of the people out there to sort of bring them in line with the latest ideas coming out from sort of the UEFA coaching approaches and things of this nature to improve the quality of the game back in the Philippines, and this has allowed them to put in a better pitch. This extra £1 million has been ring fenced for improving the pitch. Tranmere's pitch was a bit up and down this season, and it's going to allow them next season. Tragically in League Two, because as we said, they weren't relegated, they were booted out. I think they'll be in a really strong position to be able to progress on the pitch, and we're all hoping that football is going to return before a proper audience, and put in a good campaign for 2021.
It's great that they're doing that for kids in the Philippines, but with all due respect to Tranmere, I imagine that when the kids in the Philippines ask them where Tranmere is, they say, "Oh, we're the third club in Liverpool." Despite what I just said about them being a distinct identity. Go, no, we're definitely the third club in Liverpool. Well, talking of football being back, the MLS is back, Kieran.
So this is a competition called MLS is Back, and it's proving to be quite controversial. It was arranged by the league itself, originally for 26 clubs. That's now down to 25 because 10 players of FC Dallas went down with COVID, so therefore they've had to withdraw. Nashville Soccer Club, they were supposed to play, I think it was today, but they've had to have their match postponed because 5 of their players have gone down with COVID.
Lord.
And by all accounts, the conditions in which the players are having to live, because this is all taking place under a bubble, effectively, in Florida. And, of course, Florida is one of the hotspots for COVID. The players are concerned about their health. They've been posting pictures of the sandwiches they've been given. And they look, it was a classic case of 1970s British rail sandwiches, with bits curling up on them. So it's not going down particularly well. Nobody's quite sure of the format of the competition, and you've also got to ask yourself, who's going to watch it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, what is the TV audience for MLS?
It's not on the major networks. I think it's an ESPN product.
Okay.
And we'll have to wait and see. I think you and I. We've both been watching the Premier League with a sort of it's a bit ho-hum now, isn't it? We really do miss the atmosphere and the energy that is brought to football by having a crowd there. I mean, if Palace had been playing last night and you were 3-2 down, having just scored against Chelsea, you wouldn't have lost that match, would you? The crowd would have pushed them on to get an equaliser. And it's that which is missing.
Funny enough, we discussed this on the Palace pod today because there is that, but there's also my theory that if we had been playing that in front of the crowd, we would have been egging them on and they would have all charged forward and then Chelsea would have scored a 4th goal on the break. So, swings and roundabouts. It's not so much missing the atmosphere on TV, it's missing the atmosphere by going to games. That's what I miss. I hate the fake atmosphere on TV. I'd rather listen to it in silence. It's an artificial situation, so I don't mind having an artificial situation by watching and just hearing the players. But and also, I mean, I suppose the other thing with the MLS as well, because we know Trump has got a huge. The kindest thing you can say about Trump and sport is he doesn't understand it. He seems to think they're all wacko revolutionaries. But I kind of guess he'd be egging some of the teams to be playing behind or in front of a full crowd if he could. I mean, he won't be at all happy to see MLS teams taking these precautions and playing behind closed doors, I guess, would he?
Yep. I think they are. There is an issue clearly in the States with the rise and the second wave of COVID, they're not getting it right. That's the best you can say. And for a country which I think we all historically have looked up to, their ability to get things wrong on a regular basis on things such as health and clearly here in sport is a cause for concern.
Yeah, this is. We need to get you off because your game kicks off in 5 minutes. But I think we probably need to do an American special at some stage because where does MLS rank? Obviously it's a long way behind NFL and basketball and baseball, but is it anywhere near getting there? I mean, we see a lot of white middle-class American fans sort of adopting British fan culture, supporting teams managed by various ex-English people. But, I mean, how far behind in terms of economics is MLS?
Economics, it runs itself pretty well because they do have salary caps, because all of the money is centralised. So it is very much run on a franchise basis. The crowds in the main are pretty good. The one thing that American franchises are good is selling themselves and engaging with fans. I know I went to Canada a couple of years ago and watched Vancouver Whitecaps, and it was a great experience. We went along to one match on a Wednesday, and we enjoyed it so much we went along to another match 3 or 4 days later in the singing section. And that's where I do think that they've not quite got the understanding. So when the opposition team was being announced, they were shouting wanker at the names of all the opposition players, but smiling about it. And I don't think they quite understand that football is all about, stupid hatred.
Yeah, well, I quite agree. And I imagine, speaking of stupid hatred, I imagine as a Brighton fan, it would have been quite nice for you to be in a section of fans that were actually doing some singing. That would have been a nice experience for you. Okay, we need to finish because we are literally 2 minutes from the kickoff of your game. I nearly said good luck then. People would have realised I was taking the piss. Listen, if any of our American listeners want to ask questions about the MLS, then please do. If any of you have got any questions about anything that we've spoken about tonight or anything about the game, our next pod is, of course, our questions one. And if you want to get in touch with us, it's questions@priceoffootball.com. In the meantime, I hope you have a good weekend. I rarely get to say this, but come on, Liverpool.
Stay safe, boys and girls.
The price of football. The price of football.